Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Indian and Alaska Native Behavioral Health webinar series. I'm Kate Trams, and today we have Dr. Vanessa Simons who will be speaking on environmental health literacy for youth. This training series is brought to you by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center, and we are one of 4 national focus centers serving the ATTC network, which also includes 10 regional centers and a network coordinating office. To learn more, please visit our website. Our center is a NADAC certified educational provider, and we'd be happy to provide you with CEHs for a $15 fee. The CEH request form is available for download in the Files pod in the webinar screen, and we will also be sending this form out in a follow-up email to all who attended. Immediately following today's webinar, you will be redirected to our GPRA evaluation. GPRA stands for the Government Performance and Results Act, and SAMHSA asks us to evaluate our events in order to comply with this act and provide improved performance assessment and accountability. This survey asks about your satisfaction with the event and will take less than 10 minutes to complete. We thank you in advance for helping us to improve our programs. And I'd like to go over a couple of things about the Adobe Connect system. So if you would like to view the presentation in full screen, you'll just want to click on the button at the top of that pod, which looks like 4 arrows pointing outward. And then to return to the regular screen, if you want to ask questions and submit them in the Q&A pod or anything like that, you'll want to just click that button again. I mentioned the Q&A pod. You'll see it just to the right of the presentation, and the field to type in your questions is at the very bottom. So we welcome you to submit questions at any time during the presentation, and we will likely address those at the end. But feel free to submit them as they come up. We'd also like you to be aware that this webinar records participant attention time. So if you minimize the webinar or are working in another window, the system will record your participation as inactive, which may be reflected in the number of CEHs received. Today's speaker is Dr. Vanessa Simons. Dr. Simons is an enrolled member of the Crow tribe and a descendant of the Blackfeet Nation, and is an assistant professor of community health at Montana State University. And she's also a former assistant professor here at the University of Iowa College of Public Health. She uses community-based participatory research approaches to address health and health literacy issues ranging from chronic disease to environmental health among Native Americans. She's currently funded through Montana State's Center for Health Equity Research to work in partnership with the Crow community members to develop an environmental health literacy program for Crow youth and their families. So Dr. Simons is here today to share about this program, and we're delighted to have her, and thrilled that we can collaborate with her, and we're just very excited about hearing about her work. So I'm gonna welcome her on now and pass things over.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you everyone for having me. I'm very happy to be able to share about the work that I've been involved in for the past 2.5 years. So just to give you some background, so I'm Crow, and this project takes place on the Crow Reservation. The Crow Reservation is located in south central Montana. It's a rural reservation. Um, it was established by the Treaty of 1851, originally covering 38 million acres, but then has been whittled down to a much smaller area. Today we have 2.2 million acres, but this is part of our original homeland. It's the largest reservation in Montana and the 5th largest in the country, with approximately 12,000 people and 70% of Crows living there. So I was very happy to be able to work with my tribe in developing this project over the past couple of years. Let's see, oops, next slide. I just want to acknowledge the many partners that have been involved in this project with me, ranging from the Crow Agency Public School, the Crow Tribe's Cultural Committee. I also work closely with Little Bighorn College, my students at Montana State University, and the Crow Environmental Health Steering Committee, as well as the consultants and advisors I work with. So when I came back to Montana in 2014, I was looking for a project to work on, and I'm very interested in doing community-based participatory research. And so that's research that's done in partnership with the community, from identifying the issue you want to work on through developing the research questions and the data collection instruments and analysis to disseminating the results. And I met with a well-established CBPR project, the Crow Environmental Health Steering Committee, and they've been working at Crow for over 10 years addressing water quality issues. They've looked at well water, they've looked at the streams and the springs, looking at microbial contaminants as well as mineral contamination. And so when I came in, I met with them and talked to them about what my strengths or what my interests were, which are related to health literacy and health education. That's my background. To see how that could fit with what they'd already been doing over these past 10 years. And one of the things we talked about was taking and pushing the project further and seeing if I could do more to help raise awareness and educate people about the findings that been um, what they'd been uncovering, what they'd been finding. And so um, the first meeting I had, I went over with my doctoral student, and we had a great idea of what we were going to do. And we went to the meeting, and uh, and it kind of just got all changed around, uh, because one of the things people talked about was how much they wanted to get youth involved, how much they wanted to kind of pass this information on to the young people. And they wanted to keep this project going on, keep people interested in understanding the importance of water in their community. And so, one thing that one of the steering committee members talked about was he was talking about how, with smoking, how his kids had put posters on his door and talked to him about the dangers of smoking, and really his desire to quit partly came from his children teaching him about the dangers of smoking and really kind of pressuring him to quit and teaching about the health, how it was affecting their health as well. And so this model has also been used with seat belts. So you're teaching the kids about buckling up and then having them bring that to their family. And so we thought about this as a way to really reach the youth as well as to have them educate their family. And so the Crow Environmental Health Steering Committee introduced me, had me go talk to the local principal at the Crow Agency Public School, and to kind of meet with him to see if he would be interested in this concept of partnering with us to work with his students. And so his school is kindergarten through fifth grade. And so we decided the best age to work with would be fourth graders, so we could kind of follow them up for a couple of years, and they might be a good age range to reach with our messages. They're also located right next to the tribal college. They're a couple blocks away, so we felt that this is a easy to reach group right there. And then the other group is Little Bighorn College. So I worked with Little Bighorn College as well, and they became one of our major partners. They've been also housing much of the work that the Crow Environmental Health Steering Committee has been doing over the years. And so after that meeting with the steering committee, my students and I went back to the literature and we tried to find, kind of to see what people had done, how they had used this idea of children passing messages to parents. And so this is one of the models we found. And what we found was that a lot of this had been done more in developing countries. Like there's Kenya had done stuff with hygiene, personal hygiene, getting kids to wash their hands. And basically what the idea is the guardians, which is what we call our students, they get information, the teaching activity from our program staff, and they go out and teach other people in their school, the rest of the school population, as well as their families. They directly teach them what they're learning, and then we hope that spreads out into the rest of the community. And so the other model that we had to develop as we were thinking about this program was to think about what is environmental health literacy. And so this is getting a lot more attention in the past couple of years, um, building off of health literacy, but going into the specific area of environmental health. And so health literacy is about that interaction between the skills and abilities of individuals and the population and how it matches up with the information that health providers and health educators are providing. And so making sure that matches. But it's beyond just reading and writing ability. So we liked Nutbeam's conceptualization of health literacy and we applied it to environmental health. And so basically, he has these three different levels. Functional literacy is that basic knowledge, those basic literacy skills. Oh, having trouble hearing me? Let's see. So, functional literacy is those basic literacy skills and the ability to apply the literacy skills to water and health related information. And so these include vocabulary as well as math skills. The next level is interactive literacy. And so this is the ability to use water-related information in this case and to understand it and to share it with their peers and their family members. And so we saw this as being the piece where the students could take home activities that they were learning in our programs and share it with their families. And then the third level is this critical literacy. And this is about the ability to analyze these water-related problems and then to work with others to take action. And so some of the concepts and topics we worked on in our program were having the students develop digital stories, movie making, and art projects. So after we had this, it took us about a year to kind of really get the conceptualization of how we wanted to see environmental health literacy. And we identified the goals of the program. We met with our steering committee monthly, and that included the Crow Environmental Health Steering Committee, as well as our new partners, including researchers from MSU and our partners at Little Bighorn College. The next thing we did, we also had a discussion of the role of children in the Crow community because we wanted to make sure this fit with what was acceptable in the community. And so we talked a lot about how children are sacred and how that is a value in the Crow community, but that we also had to be careful about not having kids go home and telling their parents what to do or whatever, trying to tell adults what to do. Another important aspect we had to think about was what really are the topics and the messages that we needed to cover. So we had to work closely with the steering committee to think about what are the things that they had found, what are the messages that they want to relay to their children and the rest of the community. And so what we decided to do is we decided to do a summer camp and an after-school program. And people were really excited about this idea of a summer camp. And so that's the first thing we started out was a pilot of the summer camp in 2015. And so the components of the program, as I mentioned, we had these functional literacy objectives, and so that's the basic knowledge that we wanted kids to get. And we felt that they needed some basic understanding of water-related knowledge, and so some basic science literacy. And then another major component is that interactive literacy, and that's the sharing with the parents. And so we included a newsletter every session, which had activities and some kind of project they had to do with their parents when they got home or their family members. And then the critical literacy objectives were thinking about how they can work together to use this information to make changes. So that first year, actually, I kind of wanted to take more time to develop the program, but our principal was really excited. He actually got his own funding from the tribe to get this off the ground and running right away. So that was pretty exciting and kind of helped push us along. And so that first summer, we really used it more as a pilot of testing out the activities that we wanted to do. And these were more the learning activities, the functional literacy. And we use a lot of Project Wet. And so they have a website, and they have a lot of great water related science based activities for youth. And so we had our staff trained by the Project Wet staff to implement these activities, and then we found ones that fit with the messages that we were trying to convey. So the components of the program include these science-based activities related to the functional literacy. So we did different ones called Ask the Bugs, Aqua Bodies, and Life Box, which I'll talk about in a minute. We also included in the summer program field trips. So we did a field trip to the water treatment plant. We went to the river that was close by. We also went to two local springs to sample the water and to learn about water quality. And then we also had art-based activities, which included some drama-based activities where we had an actor, a Crow actor, come in and talk about his career, and then to run through some activities with the students to get comfortable talking in front of each other, because we felt that's an important component of our program, is to help to kind of foster and help these students feel comfortable sharing this information with others. And then another really fun and important part of the project was the storytelling, where each day we had, during the camp, we had an elder come in and talk about some aspect of the importance of water in Crow culture. And so we finally settled on the first main health message, which is this basic message of water is life, water is sacred, and that it's essential to community and personal health. And so that first piece was a lot, the science based piece was talking to the kids about um, how water is important to their bodies and how much water we have in our bodies and how much water the human body is made of, how much water is in our food. Um, and then we also had a session in the second summer about hygiene, washing your hands, and thinking about how water is important to our health in the manner of it can spread contamination to ourselves, to humans. So if our water is contaminated, that contamination can get into our bodies. The next major concept that we talked about was stream and groundwater health. And so we visited several sites that are important in the community to talk about the health of the streams. And that kind of tied in with how we have to take care of our water because our water is important to our personal and community health. And so we learned about assessing streams, stream assessment. We talked about we tested the water. We took samples from the water to test the microbial contamination, and um, and so the second slide shows this is where we visited the Little Bighorn, and then what we did is from Project Wet they have an activity called Ask the Bugs, and so we first do a simulation of that, and it shows you how there's tolerant and intolerant insects in the river, and by seeing who's living in the river, it can tell us something about the water quality. And so that was a really exciting activity for the kids. They really liked looking at the actual insects that we collected. We had microscopes and we had them identify them and talk about what that meant about their river. And then we also examined the actual samples from the water and learned about how water is cleaned by the water treatment center. And so that was also really hands-on and exciting for the kids as well. Sorry. And so we visited two of the springs on the reservation and looked at microbial bacteria in those springs and compared. One of the springs had not been ever tested before, so that was really cool that they got to be part of a science project that hadn't been, and a real life research project, I guess. Um, and then, so the next slide, so then the next major message we wanted to talk about was water conservation. And so we talked about who uses water and how much we use. And so this is a picture of a water footprint. So we talked about, how much what when do we use water and how much of that water are people using. This picture is one of the activities we did with hauling water. So the first thing we did is we had an elder come in and talk about how water was used when she was a kid, and how precious a resource this is, and how difficult it was. When you had to go get water from the river and haul it. And then we did an activity with the kids, moving water from two different pools so they could understand that concept. And then we also visited the local water treatment plant, and we had members from the water treatment center come and talk to us about how that water is cleaned. And so kids also took samples. We went around the second year and we took samples just at different sinks around the community, and then from the river, from a puddle, so then we could just see how different levels. So you could see, like, from your fountain, from your sink, your tap, how that water gets so much cleaner than when you go find it in a puddle or in the river. We also wanted to integrate Crow values and culture into our project. And so, as I mentioned, we had elders come in and speak to us and tell stories about how water was important. The first year, we had the chairman come in and talk about our flag and talk about what he thought were important ways that water was important to Crow culture. This is an activity that the Velma Pickett, our project coordinator, developed. And so this is a map of the waters, the streams on the Crow Reservation. And we also had a guest speaker come in, and we taught them and talked about the Crow names for these rivers and streams. And so one of the cool stories was one of the parents told us how they were driving past one of these spots, and their son knew the Crow name, and he was like, "Where did you learn that?" And so he said he learned it in our camp. And then, as I mentioned, we also want to integrate the arts into our projects, as well as public speaking skills. And so these pictures are from when Noah Watson, actor, came in and ran through some different activities with us to practice, getting comfortable, being in front of people. And then one of the pictures is where the students are um, kind of they did pictures and murals about how they use water, and we're explaining them to each other. And so, of course, we had to evaluate and see whether or not our program was working. And so we did pre and post tests of environmental health attitudes and behaviors. We did pre and post tests of our knowledge objectives, or the functional literacy. And then we did paired interviews with the students and individual interviews with their parents. And so the first thing we did is we went out into the literature to see what existing measures there were related to environmental literacy. And so there are several measures for kids, but the thing is we were really focusing on water and health. And so we couldn't use a lot of those measures, but we pulled some of the questions from those measures, and used them to get an idea of what were people's attitudes and how did they change pre and post. And so these are some of the items that we use from existing measures. So we asked them about, would they be willing to use less water? We wanted to ask that the behavior, would they be willing to change their behaviors relating to using water? We asked them questions about, was there any changes in whether or not they were able to talk to tribal leaders or their friends, and whether or not they enjoyed learning about water, if they'd heard stories about springs and water, etc. And so what we found was we did found increases related to the kids having role models who respected the environment, which I think was also partly due to the fact that we had these little bighorn interns. So these were tribal college students were part of our were part of running the camp both years, and so the students. It was really nice to have these role models from the community there, talking to the students and teaching the students. Students also increased attitudes related to conserving water and to talking to others about water related issues. One thing we realized after that first summer camp, was that some of our questions needed to be modified for clarity and specificity. So, for example, I turn off the water when I brush my teeth versus talking about turning off the faucet. And another issue, we talked to Dr. Rima Rudd, who is a leader in health literacy, and she gave us this idea to actually use these scenarios. So this example is John went swimming with his family. He noticed a lot of trash along the river edge. What should John do? And so we found that the questions that we got from the literature, a lot of them were confusing to the kids. They were confusing even to us when we were trying to have them answer them. And so these questions that I actually liked answering, and it seemed like they really understood it a lot better. So really that first summer in 2015, and even in the camp that we did last year, our focus was a lot more on the functional literacy, on these basic science literacy and understanding the scientific concepts. And the feedback we got from the teachers was really that first year was we had to give them a basis first. We had to talk about, some of these people don't, some of these kids, they might not know what water is, our basic chemical properties. And so or the water cycle. And so we put those into our the after school program. Um, but the other thing is we realized after that first summer camp that we needed to make sure we worked with the teachers a lot more to ensure that the what we were teaching matched with what the grade level. And so we taught the water cycle, and I think it's good to review the water cycle and talk about the four essential factors of life, but to realize that we couldn't really we couldn't see a change in that because the kids, most of the kids already knew about the four essential factors of life and had some idea related to the water cycle. Um, One of our activities was Life Box, and so that's where we talked about photosynthesis and the four factors of life. And most of the kids already had this, could answer the basic question about photosynthesis, so we didn't see any changes there. One of the activities where we saw the most change was related to aqua bodies, and so this is an activity where kids learn about how much water is in all of their different organs. And then one of my students, who is a former teacher, she added on a game where kids run around the classroom and learn about and have to go find the organs that have certain percentages of water, and that really got the kids into it and moved them around. But kids could answer that question, and that was the one where we saw the pre-post test. One problem we had that first year was we went to Pryor, which is about an hour and a half away from Crow Agency, and had a guest speaker that day. We tested the springs, we did some interviews with the kids, and we just really wore them out that day. And so on that day, we didn't see as much change in positive change, like we didn't see them improving their knowledge as well. But we also realized that our questions and those activities were a little bit too complex for this grade level. And so in the second year, we modified them to better fit that grade level. And so we also asked some questions related to watershed and the water quality. And we did pre-tests each day, and it was just 2 or 3 questions based on the material they were going to learn, and then a post-test in the afternoon. But some days we got a little overwhelmed, and so we did our post-test the next day. And so we just realized that the timing of the pre and post tests, we had to work on that a little more. And then another thing was the terminology. And so we had to make sure in the next summer when we did this, we made sure to match the terminology, make sure we're using the same terminology and that those terminology were reflected in our pre and post questions. And so the next thing that we did, as I mentioned, is we did interviews with the students. So, and these some of the interviews asked the kids about the questions. So we wanted to kind of get a little more, see if how they understood the questions that we were asking them, these pre and post tests. And then we also asked them some basic questions about what they liked most about the camp. And so some of the kids said they liked the camp, they liked the field trip, they liked it because they got to learn history, that they had learned how to keep it clean, and that they learned about water being one of the 4 elements. And then we also wanted to see if they were going to actually share this information with their family and friends, and what exactly they had learned and wanted to share with their family and friends. And so one student talked about, that you have to test the water before you drink it, not to throw stuff in it. And then another student said they would tell their family that it was fun, and they would talk to them about the springs and all the stuff that they went to see. And then, so these are all from the pilot in 2015. And so we talked to the parents. We asked the parents about their perception of what their kids had learned. And so lots of parents said overall, they felt their child had loved the camp, that she didn't know as much before, and then she became more aware of it, and that she liked the trip to Pryor and the story. And so from the parent interviews, we also asked them about what they thought about the idea of having children be agents of change, or to teach them to learn about environmental health and then take that information home to them. And overall, we got a positive response from parents. So the lessons we learned from that first summer were that we really had to make sure we had to work closely with the teachers and to make sure that our activities were at the appropriate grade level and that our questions were also at the appropriate grade level. And just making sure that our objectives for the day, our functional literacy objectives, matched the questions we were asking them, ensuring that our vocabulary, that all of our teaching staff were using the same vocabulary. And really, we were covering a lot in that camp, and so kind of focusing in on some main messages and repeating them every day. Another thing that we learned, and especially was reiterated to us from the teachers, is that we really need to explicitly state the role of the guardians to the students. So they know, kind of talk about what it means to be a guardian and what that means to them. And so we realized in that first summer camp, we weren't really focusing on the students as agents of change. It was more just seeing how these questions worked and what kinds of activities we could do. And then in the after school program, which we started last fall, we focused more in on having the kids become guardians and have them talk about what that means. And so we did several activities related to respect. That's a core concept for our program, is respecting themselves, respecting their community, respecting the environment, respecting their water. And so after that first summer, another thing that we learned was that we wanted to break them up into small groups with an assigned leader. And so, because we had several people on staff, we had like 6 teachers, and so they were kind of just roaming around instead of sticking with a group. And one of our problems just came with the logistics. We lost our project coordinator she was no longer with the program the week before we started the camp, and then we hired on our interns like the week of the camp. that made that first summer difficult because not everybody, and that's kind of why some of the staff was not using the same terminology as the questions. So fortunately, it got better for the after school program in the next year. Another thing that we learned was that we didn't split the kids. We had, from the literature, we had thought that the kids would feel more comfortable if they answered the interviews in pairs. Um, but some of the pairs had an older student in them or a more talkative student, and so we thought that maybe the next year we would want to interview them in equivalent age pairing, so the same age. Because that first summer we had fifth and sixth graders in our camp, and so having a young fifth grader with an older sixth grader might not have worked as well. But we still thought that although we had read in the literature that that was a good way to go, some of our interviewers talked about how the kids kind of just copied what the other kids said, so it might work better just to interview them individually. We also wanted to, after that first summer, we wanted to include more of the Crow words, and so we try to do that more in the after school program, which we did with the learning with the map that I showed you. And then the teachers also talked a lot about having us use more audio and visual resources and games. And so that second summer, we did a lot more games and we had more videos. And so just this past summer, we did a lot better job than we did the first summer. We modified our questions to better fit the activities and to be a lot easier to understand for the students. We were able to implement more of a formative evaluation. So for each day, we had the teachers. We had two teachers from the Crow Agency Public School there who we developed checklists to make sure that we were covering the components we were supposed to cover and to make sure that to just get their feedback on how the activities were going. And so that first year, we really focused on that first summer, we were piloting the activities. And then in the after school program, we were really refining kind of that functional literacy piece. And so for this past summer, 2016, we were able to focus a little bit more on interactive literacy. And so we looked at our newsletters and we made sure we applied health literacy principles. We made sure that each day there was a specific activity that they could take home to their parents. And then we actually followed up with seeing or their parents or a family member or friend. And then they brought back the assignment the next day. And we gave them some incentives for doing that. And I was fortunate to have a master's student who was really interested in this idea of students as agents of change. And so she also helped us kind of refine this more and we developed some interview questions for the parents to really look more deeply at what is the parent's perception of the student as an agent of change. What is their perception of the communication they have with their student, and how is the student understanding their role as a guardian, and what does that mean to them? And so we're in the middle of analyzing those interviews right now. And we're beginning to work on what we're going to do for this next school year. And so we feel like that first year we focused on the functional literacy. We kind of got that under our belt, and we've expanded in understanding how we can include interactive literacy with our newsletters. And so the next stage is we're thinking more about critical literacy. And so we're probably going to develop a photo voice project with our fifth graders, and kind of we're working on deciding what are the questions that we want the kids to think about, and having them, I don't know if you guys have heard of photo voice, but having the students go out and take pictures, and kind of really understanding, what water means to them, what water means to their community. And so this project is funded by the Center for American Indian Rural Health Equity at Montana State University. And that first summer camp was also funded by the Crow Agency Public School. And then again, I wanted to acknowledge my partners at Crow. And then I just have a few references here if you're interested in students as agents of change or the concept of environmental health literacy. So if anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simons. That was a really interesting and informative sessions. And yeah, I want to welcome people to submit their questions. Like we said, you can type into the Q&A pod. The field is at the bottom of that box. So I'll start off with a question that came up for me. At the beginning of the presentation, Dr. Simons, you mentioned how you want to make sure that the way that you communicate to students so that they bring this information home to their families is done in a respectful way. Do you have ways of teaching the kids how to approach bringing some of this information into their homes that is respectful of their elders? Is that part of what you're teaching as well?
So yeah, we've had a lot of talks about making sure that we're doing this in an appropriate way, because we talked about we don't want kids coming home and kind of, and also saying, oh, Dr. Simons tells us we have to go do this, or our water is bad, or something like that. Um, and so we're still, I think the way we've done it, I don't know if we've really have the perfect way yet, but the way we've done it more right now is um, through our newsletters and through kind of having them be much more messages where it's about communicating with so asking questions of their elders. So one of the activities is just, going home and ask someone in your family about, a time when you had to haul water and to tell you about, what that was like for you. Um, and so just making, at this point, really just making it about a dialogue and asking questions and realizing that they're learning from their elders as well as the elders learning from the kids. But I think that is something that we have struggled with this program, as well as thinking about kids at this age and uh, what are the messages that they can share with their parents, and what are the things that they can do to make changes on this issue. Um, so right now it's much more. We try to keep it as a dialogue, I think, with our newsletters.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I see a lot of those same issues with other, yeah, other behavioral health literacy programs that are often taught to youth, and how that can sometimes conflict with what's going on at home when in their the behaviors of the adults at home if they are participating in or might have struggles with alcoholism or those kind of things, and if they're learning about this in school that's bad, it might cause tension. And yeah, I appreciate your perspective on that, because that's always a difficult line to draw as far as how we can teach youth and also keep those relationships in a good and safe place. Um, Sorry, I don't know if you had anything else to comment about that, but
Oh no, I'm just saying, yeah, I agree with
great.
you.
Um, we have another question from Jane. She asks, in the Crow culture, what are the four elements?
So it's earth, air, fire, and water.
Wonderful. It looks like that is all the questions that we have for now. We did have someone comment earlier. They put up you mentioned the project WET, and so they did put up the link to that resource. So if people were interested in that, you can see the link for Project WET is in the Q&A pod. Um, And with that, I think it looks like we might be finished for today's session. And so again, I just want to thank Dr. Simons for sharing this program with us. And yeah, it was wonderful to hear about your process and the way you've brought this program to the youth in the Crow Nation. And it's very helpful to see the work that you've done and the progress that you've made. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. And I'll just remind you that we will be sending out some follow-up information. You'll get the handouts from today's presentation, as well as a link to the recording if you want to review it at a later date or share it with others. And also a CEH request form if you wanted to earn CEHs for attending today. And feel free to get in touch with me if you have questions. Feel free to just respond to those emails. So thank you again, Dr. Simons. And yeah, did you have anything final you wanted to say before we close out?
Just thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to share about this project. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Well, we are honored to be able to share this. And yeah, wish everyone the best and thanks again for joining us today. Have a good day.